Back WN here, but before we get to that, we continue to tear apart what was a very, very poor effort by the Ravens down in Carolina and Charlotte. Was a quick in and out for me, and a lot of fans went down. There was a lot of purple in the stadium, but not a lot to cheer about. And Luke, the offense at this point, when you've lost 3 out of your 5 offensive linemen, I probably would have told you this wasn't going to go well, but the running part of this thing hasn't gone well really from the beginning. And I don't know that they ran the ball poorly statistically, 5 yards a carry, whatever you want to say, but when it comes to reliability and them being able to run the football, dude, we're at the halfway pole here, right? You know, we're about to make the turn for home, and there's nothing here that looks like a running game. And right now, with the offensive line being where it is and Ronnie Stanley going down on Sunday, there's nothing that looks like a cohesive offensive line right now, and that's a lot different than, let's say, 3-4 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, at least 3-4 weeks ago, you were healthy, and you were continuing to pass protect well, and they had that they could hang their hat on. The run game hasn't been there all year. At this point, I'd be lying to you if I felt confident that they were going to make meaningful improvement, because I think that's just kind of where they are, and especially now you throw in the injuries. And
well, they're bringing in the Fitz-Toussaint and stuff, right? Like, so that's where they are at this point, is looking at other running backs, right? Literally.
Right. And I think that tells you that even though I thought Alex Collins, the fumble aside, that I really don't put on him nearly as much as the fact that you let a defensive tackle come through unscathed to blow up a play. Overall, he ran pretty well on Sunday, but at the same time, you can go back and watch some previous weeks. I went back and rewatched all of his runs against New Orleans. He's left some yards on the field. So I think the fact that they ran out running, or that they worked out running backs, the fact they have the injuries now, and, I mean, let's face it, do you really look at Alex Lewis and James Hurst as being these colossal losses in terms of how they've played individually? Probably not, but it does speak to the lack of depth that they have, that when you lose those guys, even if they haven't been playing at all-pro levels, it's still tough to replace them. And we know how depth is so fleeting along the offensive line around the league. I mean, there are really good teams even that are struggling to find a starting 5 that they feel good about. It's just the nature of the beast in 2018 with offensive line play. But it's just really tough, and I think what's concerning for me, they haven't had a running game. They didn't have a running game in September, even when the offense was playing at a higher level. But you look at where they are, where they were in the month of October. The Ravens average 18.5 points per game in October. Joe Flacco, 5.9 passing yards per attempt. You know, those numbers remind you a lot more of last year, don't they?
Yeah, those are the old Dennis Pitted dump, yeah, exactly.
And with me saying that about Flacco specifically, part of that's on him, but I think my larger point is these very well could be signs that being so one-dimensional is really starting to catch up with them. And I don't know if there's an easy fix. People will talk about the trade deadline this week and the fact that the Ravens worked out some other running backs. And look, everything should be on the table. And we've talked about this as far as the uncertainty of the future for the likes of John Harbaugh and Joe Flacco, and mentioning Eric DeCosta taking over next year. And who knows? I mean, there could be wholesale changes. But in the meantime, everything should be on the table to try to get better. And if that means you can somehow swing a trade for another offensive lineman that you actually feel good about and isn't just a street free agent that you're just going to bring in like they did with Hronis Grasu a few weeks ago, who started on Sunday, I'm all for that. I'm all for the idea.
Remember, they brought in Garrod at one point. They brought in Bryant McKinney at one. They brought in guys like this at various points in other seasons. It would not be unprecedented, right?
Yeah. I mean, but the question is, how much will it help? And I think that's fair. And you certainly don't want to give up a really, really meaningful asset for something that's not really going to net that big of a return or that much of an improvement. But here we are. And when you have so many individuals that are, let's call a spade, playing or coaching for a job, coaching for their future, playing for their future, then there is going to be more urgency to try to make an improvement if you can. I mean, don't do anything crazy, and I don't think Ozzie Newsome's going to do anything crazy, but if there's something you can do that you think is going to help you run the football a little more effectively, and we're not talking making this a top 10 running game, just don't be next to last in yards per carry like they were entering Sunday's game. I'm not buying that Sunday was any kind of meaningful improvement, even though, as you mentioned, the final rushing totals actually looked pretty attractive. But keep in mind, they also had a 17-yard run from Lamar Jackson and a 13-yard scramble from Joe Flacco in there. So you're not expecting that every week, at least from Flacco anyway. But how much better can it get? I don't know. But at this point, I'm not expecting it to get much better, and I think you're starting to see some of the cracks in the foundation of all this offensive improvement that we saw early in the season, but being so one-dimensional, it's really difficult for any quarterback to do that, and I think history, we've said this before, this isn't a new revelation, but Joe Flacco is not the kind of quarterback that can just sit back there and throw it 45, 50 times consistently and feel like you're going to be really successful more often than not doing it that way. Very, very, very few quarterbacks can do that. And I think he needs more of a complementary running game. And what's frustrating about this is the Ravens had a pretty good running game last year. And I know Ryan Jensen's no longer here, and you can kind of point to a couple others here and there. But how do you go from being not great, but very solid, very good at times last year running the ball, and now you've kind of sort of fixed the passing game, or at least made it better, and you can't run the football. So
yeah, but they're never going to try to run the football 30 times in a game, and part of that is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like you don't try it, you're not good at it. You're not good at it, so you don't try it. It kind of reminds me of playing a guitar or something like that. But that's part of the issues. You look up every week, and they're just never going to run a lot to be good at it or to show that they're good at it. The time that you would be good at it is when you're home and up by 2 touchdowns with 2 minutes left to go in the third quarter. That's when you'd like to say, all right, this is where our run total goes from 18 this week to 32 this week because we're going to run 7 out of 8 plays in the third and fourth quarter. We're going to run 18 or 19 plays, and 15 of them are going to be runs. They've never put themselves in a position to do that, and they certainly never come out of the gate looking to run the football.
Well, I mean, but that's part of the league. I mean,
sure,
really
I agree. I mean, I think it's kind of like old school, new school baseball conversations, We don't talk about hit and run anymore because it doesn't exist.
Well, but you just think about it. I mean, I just cited even Joe Flacco not having a great month of October. Those yards per attempt is markedly better than even a pretty good running game in the NFL. I mean, you move the ball better through the air. I mean, you just do. Unless you have an extraordinary running game, that's just the way it works. But I don't think the solution is to just run more. They need to get better at it. But, I mean, Nestor, you watch the games just like I do. How many times have you seen them try to run the ball and they put themselves in second or third and long then? I mean,
much of the running game
I wouldn't
to
run
me,
the ball either. They can't do it. That's the problem.
But so much of it plays off the passing game, and when you have the kind of running back, and I keep going back to Ray Rice, right, because he's sort of the gold standard around here, a guy that could block, a guy that could get out into space, could catch a pass, could run, or could just be a straight-ahead running back, or could line up as a wide receiver if you needed him to, right? So, we had all those. When I see McCaffrey, and I see Kamara, and I see what these two teams have done the last couple of weeks, not so much Gio Bernard, but given what Le'Veon Bell represents in that case, that's the running back isn't Jamal Lewis anymore, the fat back or the Earl Campbell or even the Zeke Elliott. I mean that's not the typical way you want to do this. The way you want to do this is, you look up McCaffrey only carried the ball 14 times, 45 yards, not so much. He caught 4 more passes in the game. He wasn't all that effective. He's probably a poor example on Sunday, but that's kind of what you want more of, more that adaptive dual role kind of back who can also block a little bit, not get your quarterback killed when he's out there.
No doubt about it. And it's funny because I think it was just someone on my Twitter timeline, just a Ravens fan who made a really astute point when we've talked so much about the wide receiver position, right? And we've talked about tight end since Dennis Pitta's initial hip injury, how that's been an issue for them despite some of the draft picks they've invested in and trying to get better there. And we'll see about Hayden Hurst. Mark Andrews has done some nice things, certainly, in the touchdown department. But that's still to be determined. But this individual brought it up, and I think it's such it lends itself exactly to what you just said. The Ravens have not had that kind of a weapon out of the backfield really since the Super Bowl year with Ray Rice. Ray Rice's last year with the Ravens, he wasn't Ray Rice anymore. And I remember that running game was so poor in 2013, and he was overweight. And
well, this is why you bring in Danny Woodhead. This is what you thought Justin Forsett could be, and you're always sort of reaching for that, right? We're still waiting for Ray Lewis to run back out.
Success. I mean, Forsett had a Pro Bowl season. I mean, I love Justin Forsett. I mean, that was a great story, but it was very fleeting. It was 1 year, and he was kind of back to just being okay the year after that. And Danny Woodhead was old and couldn't stay healthy, and Terrence West was just a placeholder as much as you were rooting for a Baltimore kid to do well. Alex Collins was a really good story last year, but is anyone watching him this year and saying, yep, he's going to be the running back the next 5 years? And that's not a knock on him. That's not all about him. It's kind of the whole thing in its totality. Ray Rice was one of those guys, those special talents that could cover up inefficiencies. He could cover up mistakes or weaknesses or maybe someone on the offensive line that wasn't holding up his end of the deal. I mean, it's not like Ray Rice was the kind of back who carried it 25 times consistently. It was, to the point that you made, he would have 16 carries, but he would also catch 7 passes for 70 yards and maybe take one of those to the house and be a weapon for you. And the Ravens, since 2012, because like I said, Ray Rice really wasn't Ray Rice anymore that last full season before, of course, his legal issues that we all know. They just haven't had that kind of guy. And to your point, when you talk about guys like Le'Veon Bell the last few years, McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, those are really dangerous weapons, and those are the kind of guys that really can bridge the gap on a day when maybe your running game isn't firing, and maybe they're not gaining a bunch of yards on the ground, but they're going to make a big-time contribution as a receiver out of the backfield. And vice versa. Maybe the opposing defense has a really great coverage linebacker, or they do something to bottle them up. They can still get yards in the running game. And on those days when things are going really well, they're a dual-threat kind of weapon that the Ravens just haven't had. So that's just another element of this offense that its body of work suggests it's certainly better. And I do feel better about this offense overall than I did last year. At the same time, this passing game isn't so good that it can continue to be so one-dimensional as an offense and expect it to be good enough over the course of a full 16 games. So they've got to try to figure out a way to be a little more productive in that department, and I don't know if that's going to happen. And I think they should explore other options via trade, and who else is out there, work guys out, whatever. I mean,
well, they were doing that last week, right? I mean, there's no saying what happens here at 4-4 where Flacco's playing for his job, Harbaugh's playing for his job. Quite frankly, the next 2 games, the next 3 weeks, they're all sort of they put themselves in a position now where they're all playing for whatever their futures are around here in many, many ways up and down the roster, that if this thing goes the wrong way and a 7-9 comes up, because a 4-5 going into the bye after losing to the Steelers, we're looking at the ugliest week of radio we've done around here. I promise you that, right?
Yeah, and that's even after speaking about them being 4-5 last year. But when you're doing the same exact thing in a year that you know that you drafted a quarterback and your owner acknowledged that he nearly fired your head coach, it takes on a different animal. It really does. I mean, it takes on a different kind of life where it's not just fans shooting from the hip saying fire the coach, and as someone that's trying to be objective about it, you kind of laugh at it. It's no longer in that territory because it's a very distinct possibility. And it's not something you make light of because you're understanding that people's livelihoods are at stake. And all right, it's one thing to talk about John Harbaugh or Joe Flacco, but what about guys on John Harbaugh's staff and coach? You know, there are a lot of people at work here that these types of conversations can impact. So you want to be sensitive of that, but at the same time, you can't not talk about it because it's a distinct possibility. If you, heaven forbid, drop the next two or even just split the next two and you're 5-5, it's not good. And to your point, if they lose against Pittsburgh on Sunday and they're 4-5, I mean, all bets are off. And not that the season is over, but it is not looking good. And with that comes louder and louder talk as far as what this football team is going to look like across the board once the season comes to an end.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. All of our WNST.net coverage brought to you by our friends at Sporticulture. I got my beautiful flowers back here. When I get the sunshine on, they bloom. They are in beautiful purple. You can find them at Sporticulture. That's sporticulture.com. My man Court's growing these. They smell beautiful. He grows them right out on the west side of town. You can ship them in any NFL license, as well as college football as well. So if you're Steelers, Terps, wherever it might be, maybe you're Sparty this week at Michigan State, he'll send some beautiful green flowers out as well. It is Sporticulture and Sporticulture.com to learn more about what they do. Our friends at Patrick's in Essex, I'm going to be getting out there. We're doing a Ravens live show a little later on in the month. That will be brought to you by Fremont Mortgage and our pal Carl Delmont. But Patrick's in Essex, my old stomping grounds down there, right on Eastern Avenue. Cold beer, great bands on the weekend. There's never a cover. Great food, and the bar where everything is fresh and tasty. No more baseball over there, but they got plenty of football on, as well as the hockey game. Steak dinner night on Thursday night in the prime rib for $11.99. Monday it's tacos. Tuesday it's shrimp. And Wednesdays it's all about the wings. It's Patrick's in Essex. Make sure you go see the Johnny U wall in the back. Also, I got to tell you about our friends at Compass Point. I know the weather's been a little shaky around here. I'm going to talk to Robert Kennedy about it this week as we get ready for college basketball. But Compass Point's booking events into next spring and next summer as well. They're down in Pasadena, 36 bikini wax greens for your golfing pleasure, and it's always close to home. Robert Kennedy will be here this week talking some local college basketball. He's Buckets and Birds. He's down at Compass Point. You can learn more at compasspointgolf.com. And the night golf and the craft beer open now departed at Compass Point Golf. Luke Jones is here. He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net as we're going around Owings Mills. Luke, I can't help but look at the rest of the league and look at how the Steelers have bounced back from unfortunate ties, and where we were talking about the Browns a couple of weeks ago after beating us as legitimate. They are who we thought they were. They have their hands full there and more turmoil in the land of Cleve. And, the Bengals win again, barely, albeit, almost losing. They feel hapless sometimes, but they pull games out, and here they come one by one. Pittsburgh this week in Cincinnati. We've been scoreboard watching. I don't know that means anything this week, though, right?
It doesn't. I mean, the Ravens have really gotten into that territory. These next two games specifically, and we'll talk about some of the second half matchups that they're going to have, some tough road games. I mean, we've talked about that. We'll continue to talk about that. If, and we're only going to talk about it in the same way, if the Ravens take care of business on Sunday and then take care of business against Cincinnati after the bye. I mean, it's sitting right there for them to improve to 3-2 in the division, knowing then that you're playing Cleveland Week 17. And at that point, even with Baker Mayfield in the conversation, you're feeling better about the Browns coming into Baltimore, and you see what they've done since they beat the Ravens.
Well, they definitely have some bad teams on the schedule, right? I mean, Oakland, Tampa, Cleveland. We got some dogs coming in here that if they're any good at all, they better kick around if they think they're a 9 or 10 win team, right?
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, at some point, certainly they have some games that look very favorable, but you also have plenty of games that don't look like they're gimmies. And when you've already had 4 losses, it's a different story. But again, if you don't take care of business against Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, and heaven forbid you lose both of those games, I'm not sure we're talking about all those remaining games in the same way, because I don't think anyone's believing that they're running the table at that point. So it really does become a case of, as much as you heard some of the chatter post-game about how many wins they might need, or knowing who's on the schedule, knowing they're playing their next 3 games at home, and all of those different conversations that are there. I mean, it's part of the equation. This really does become a case of you've got to take this game on Sunday against Pittsburgh. You're focusing on that and nothing else, and you need to take care of business. And if you get a sweep over the Steelers, even though the tiebreaker isn't as prevalent right now because they had that tie, you're still in great shape then, or you're in better shape. You're feeling much better about yourself, and then you have the Bengals, who have given them fits for a long time now, but it's at home, and you feel better about that than having to go to Cincinnati. So it really is a case of blocking out all the other noise, and you hear them say that, and that's a cliche. I understand that, but it really is an issue where they need to compartmentalize this. They're going to be hearing lots of chatter from guys like us and people writing it and fans tweeting the players that this is the same drill as last year and the year before. I mean, they're going to hear all that, and that's. Well,
you earn it when you go down to Carolina and lose like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's deserved. I'm not saying it's not, but as professional athletes, as a football team that still has goals in front of them that they can achieve, you've got to block all of that out, and that's what was so disheartening about this loss on Sunday. After such a difficult defeat, a heartbreaking way in which they lost that game, and not just talking about the Tucker extra point, but just the way the fourth quarter played out in general. After they had a 10-point lead over the Saints, and I think the Saints are a heck of a football team. I think they have a great argument to be the third best team in the NFL right now. And look at what they did going to Minnesota on Sunday night. So there was no shame in that. I said that at the time. As much as it was a missed opportunity, it wasn't a disgrace to lose to the Saints, even with a 10-point lead going into the fourth quarter. But how they responded to that, it's concerning. And it really makes you question everything from the coaching on down to the special teams. I mean, it was not the kind of performance becoming of a legitimate playoff contender, a legitimate, I don't want to say Super Bowl, but at least say a contender that could do some damage in January. That wasn't reflected in having that ability, wasn't reflected in how they performed on Sunday, and it really concerns me. And I think the next couple weeks are really going to tell the story. They come home and get back on track and take care of business, then everyone exhales a little bit and says, okay, now there's 6 games left, a couple games over 500, their division record's looking good. Go do it now.
It is weird how you feel like there's only a couple of good teams in the league, though, right? And you feel like all the rest are where the Ravens are. All the rest are a 5-3 or a 4-4 or a field goal or an extra point away. I mean, Kansas City and L.A. look to be different, and obviously as long as the Patriots have Tom Brady, I'll separate them. But I'm not ready to give the Saints, who look pretty good, or the Redskins, at 3 games over 500. It's not like you're afraid of playing them at this point, but certainly, it's the Rams and the Chiefs right now, and everybody else is just another team for me.
Well, I'm going to give the Saints a little more credit than that. They've won 6 in a row. They came into Baltimore and won. I mean, if the Ravens are any good, then that's a heck of an accomplishment then. So,
well, they won again on Sunday, too. So,
yeah, they went to Minnesota and took care of the Vikings. So I'll put them not at the same level as the Rams and the Chiefs, because you watch those two teams and you sometimes wonder if they're playing a different sport. And I know they both played close games on Sunday, but they are at a different level than everyone else right now. But yeah, you're trying to figure out who everyone else really is. New England's kind of in that category with New Orleans for me. They're not the best, but they're the Patriots, just like it's Drew Brees.
Well, the other thing is they're going to get a bye, they're going to have a week off, and somebody's going to have to go up there and play them. And you don't want that to be you.
Yeah, right. You're always dealing with that, but you're absolutely right, and that's where, as much as people are frustrated with the Ravens being 4-4, and I get that. I wrote it on Sunday night that they're no longer convincing anyone that this is going to be different. I mean, it still can be different. I want to be very clear about that, but the body of work's not adding up. I mean, the wins and losses, which are what matter in the end, it's not adding up. You do the math, 4-4 is average, 4-4 is mediocre, even if you have all these other shiny statistics. But it really is a case of taking a step back and looking at the league from a universal picture where you're looking at the entire thing. There are a lot of teams that are kind of in the shape that the Ravens are in right now, and you have to get healthier. You have to take care of these next couple games, and then you're fine again. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good if you're 6-4. But anything less than that, I mean, it really does become much more of a doom and gloom kind of picture the rest of the way. But in the meantime, you do look around the rest of the league and say, who among these 4-4 teams, is there a 3-5 team that's going to get really hot that no one's talking about right now? I mean, who knows? And that's part of what makes this league great and frustrating at the same time, because every time you think you have it all figured out, then it all changes. So it really is fun in that way.
Roddy Piper. There's your wrestling reference.
Yeah, every time you think you have all the answers, I change the question. It really
and for this team, that has been the case with 3 offensive linemen down, Humphrey down now, Flacco not playing well, the running game not being there, the secondary looking tired. You know, I mentioned that to Harbaugh in the aftermath. They look fatigued to me. They look tired to me. That better not be the case when the guys with the black and gold helmets roll in here on Sunday.
Yeah, and I mean, it's always tricky for me to question. I mean, it's a completely fair question with the way that they asked, but I mean, I don't know if they were tired, but they sure played like it. You know, I don't know if they were lethargic, but they sure played like it. I mean, that was as listless as it, maybe not as listless as it gets, because I still think back to the Jacksonville game last year in London, which obviously had a whole different set of circumstances accompanying that performance, but this was up there on the list of
not good,
poor performances in the John Harbaugh era.
I would agree. I mean, top 5 all-time bad performance of the Harbaugh era. Well, you know, that Colt day will always be sitting there from back in the beginning. But
yeah,
and I can't. And the years where they're not any good, or the years where the running game's not there. There have been bad weeks, but not when you think they're good. They had us believing they were good 2 weeks ago. They better have us believing they're good again 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, you do look at some of the lesser performances, some of the worst performances, and I don't know if it's top 5, but it's certainly top 6, 7, 8, somewhere in that territory, I'd say. But you just made the point, for a team that so many were believing that, hey, this is a better team, and look at this defense that has all these great numbers and had the 11-sack performance and had a shutout, and look at this offense that has been, other than the running game, has been top half of the league or better, and has been darn efficient in the red zone and effective on third down. And you just kind of go through all the bullet points that make you think this team's better, and then all of a sudden they play the way they did on Sunday, and it makes you question it all. So they have a lot of work to do, and whatever plagued them on Sunday. And again, I think Carolina's a good team, and they've been a really good team at home in the way that the Ravens historically are a damn good team at home. But it's just, you really do wonder, and you at some point in time, we talked about this a lot after the New Orleans game, and kind of feel silly saying it after a game where they were down 3 possessions for much of the afternoon. But they've got to figure out a way to graduate from this. And you got to win close games. You can't have performances like this. And look, every team in the league just about is going to have at least one of these. So,
and usually on the road.
Yeah, exactly. Almost always on the road. But at the same time, when it comes after what happened last week, where I really thought Sunday was going to be a day that the Ravens showed you what was underneath the hood, and they were going to show some toughness and some grit. And I picked a 20-17 win. It's not like I didn't expect it to be a blowout. I didn't think it was going to be a particularly pretty game, because I think what Carolina presented wasn't going to lead to the Ravens playing a lights-out game where they scored a ton of points, and I thought Carolina's offense would be able to do at least a little bit against them, and I was way off on that because Carolina's offense did a lot against them, and the Ravens couldn't move the ball, and they were flat, and they got their butts kicked. So if I was viewing this game as a underneath the hood kind of a showing, then, well, there might not be as much underneath the hood as we thought, and that's concerning, and that's something that going into a Pittsburgh week, you don't want people questioning that. And it's one thing when the media or fans question that, but you really did get a sense that players and coaches were kind of searching when you hear John Harbaugh's comments, when you hear the comments of everyone that you can check out.
Oh, you're losing by 3 touchdowns all day. You know it's not good enough.
Yeah. So, I mean, but that sense of looking in the mirror and questioning yourself, it's needed, but you need to move on from it, and that's where you have some concern, because I think back to last year, London was such a nightmare. Everyone was talking about all the other issues at work beyond just talking about the football, that the poor performance that they put on against the Jaguars. And then what happened the following week? They got their butts kicked by the Steelers in Baltimore. And I get it, short week, travel, coming back from London. They're not dealing with those kind of things on a short plane ride home from Charlotte, but you do have an opponent that you better be ready for, or the Steelers will take it to them, and it'll be a far different animal than it was in Week 4. So they just need to be on alert and move on from this one, learn from it, and get themselves back on track to a territory where they were a few weeks ago when we were talking about this team possibly going 11-5, or maybe, dare I say, even better than that, if they could really get on a roll. Now they just need a W, and then you'll have a chance to take a deep breath, rest, get healthy on the O-line. You're hoping maybe you get 1 or 2 of those guys back for Week 9, but we'll have to see. But get this win, and then you can take a little respite and reassess, and then get ready for the second half of the season.
It is getting late early. He is Luke Jones in Baltimore. Luke out on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net. All of our WNST coverage and all of our live shows and swabbings brought to you by our friends at Freedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You're buying, selling a home, thinking about it. Get the education you need out at Freedmont.com and learn at Freedmont U as well. We'll have Carl Delmont around here this week as the Harrisburg Heat get ready to play in the Baltimore Blast and all that good stuff. Also, if you're up in Harford County and you haven't had the best crab cakes in Harford County, it's because you haven't been to Box Hill Pizzeria. And if you've never been there before, you're not going to remember what it used to look like because it's beautiful. They've remodeled it. Same great pizza, same great crab cakes. They've extended the menu. The Hitos are there, as well as the delicious salad dressing that I bring home in quarts. I bring it home like 5 bottles at a time. You got to get to Box Hill Pizzeria. BHP with all the new dressing and new window dressing as well. Stop up there, see our friends Tommy and Chris, tell them we said hello. Box Hill Pizzeria, or as I like to say, the Crab Cakeria. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I am on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. And if there's any breaking news at all, you get it first on the WNST text service. Dennis is going to be here from Thursday from 3 until 5. It is the SSV. That's the Sunday Sports Voice, now heard on Thursdays, and sponsored by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard, just like our WNST text service. Big week around here doing the residue of the World Series and the Red Sox and waiting for the Orioles to do something, anything. It's Pittsburgh week. We're heading into the bye. It's Halloween. It's very scary. And we need better football around here, that's for sure. Got some Terps residue. The Caps are playing. The Wizards are playing. NBA coaches are getting fired, all sorts of weirdness. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.